Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring this video.
What's up everyone, my name is Sara Dietschy, rhymes with Peachy, and today we are talking about virtual production. So some of you guys might have seen the behind the scenes of Mandalorian when it came out 3 years ago. That was a huge, big volume virtual production stage. And so we're gonna talk about how that actually works, but also, I'm not in my office right now. I'm actually here on a virtual production stage with Sony at NAB, where I can do things like this. So we are talking all things NAB, but more importantly, virtual production. So you're gonna see a lot of different types of these LED walls, and I'm excited for it. So let's get into it.
So NAB, yes, I know it was over a month ago. Apologies, this video is a little bit behind. I realized that when you go to conferences, you just shoot a lot of random stuff.
Maddie, how's the NAB been so far?
It's fun.
Hey, look, it's Gerald and Dunn.
Wait, who's filming this? Am I? Why am I holding your camera?
I employed Gerald. He's gonna be my new filmer.
Okay.
So let's go
Sounds
and check
good.
out NAB.
Wait, we'll get some action shots.
Ready?
And YouTube does not want random stuff. YouTube wants you talking about one subject. So it just took me a minute to put this together. But one thing that I noticed is virtual production was everywhere. Every single booth, it seemed like it just had something to do with virtual production. It was so cool to be on Sony's virtual production stage.
Do you want me to stand on a box?
I tried Vu's virtual production setup on the motorcycle.
Okay, this is exciting. It's so awkward. Hopefully I did okay.
It felt stupid, and turns out it looked stupid. I wish they actually sent out the full horizontal video. They were shooting with such a fancy camera, but of course, everything now is to just share vertical and social, so that was a little bit of a bummer. But because the motorcycle wasn't moving and the camera actually wasn't tracking with the background, and the fact that it was a super like digitally background is what led it to, you know, make a cool Instagram story, but not the best actual example of virtual production. And we're gonna get into that in this video, you know, what makes virtual production cool versus maybe some things that just fall flat. And speaking of falling flat, when I was researching for this video, virtual production obviously has a lot of positivity around it because it is a cool futuristic technology that, well, has been around in Hollywood, but it hasn't really been perfected. And I started to learn shows like Mandalorian that really put virtual production on the map in 2020 didn't have the easiest time with it. It really isn't just, oh, you just figure out everything in pre-production and then you don't have to do anything to it after. I found all of these breadcrumbs across the internet about Mandalorian not even using the backgrounds that they shot. Whoops, okay, fix it in post, right? We know how to do that. I don't know, man. Is it all a cover up? But some of you guys might be like, Sarah, what the heck is virtual production? In short, it's just a bunch of LED panels that stack together and make a bigger LED panel, and it can be the size of a very large wall, or it can be curved to create a ginormous volume. And on that screen, you could have a multitude of things. You can have a 2D background and then put physical props in front of it. So that's what I did to film the intro of this video. With the FX6, I shot a blank plate of my office without my desk or chair, and then we inserted the desk and chair at NAB. And so if you want to take a step further, you can have a fancier looking 3D background. This plate at NAB was shot, of course, with a fancy Sony Venice cinema camera. As you can see, the video is super crisp. They shot it with a lot of resolution, and because it's a town, you have the leading lines of the road, and it just looks more realistic when you put that subject in front of the background. And then the next step is where we get really fancy, and this is where a lot of virtual production happens.
Okay, so you guys have seen now 2 examples of me with 2D backgrounds, but where it gets super cool is when the camera moves, also the background can move.
This is where you have something called the frustum. This is when you start introducing live camera tracking. So there's a sensor on top of your camera, and then there's a ton of cameras up above shooting the environment. And that information is then relayed to the background. So what you're putting on the LED wall behind you is a complete virtual environment that was built in Unreal Engine. So all of that information from the camera you're shooting your subject with to the cameras that are shooting the environment gets sent to your LED wall, and as you move the camera to the left, your frustum changes. So this camera tracking allows for this proper parallax effect. think about it. I'm looking at my camera right now, and say my eyeballs are a cinema camera. When I move to the left, I start to see more of the right side of my camera, right? Because I'm moving in a 3D environment. And so that's what's happening with live camera tracking. So your frustum is actually changing as the camera is moving. It is so cool. And so that's why it can look kind of fake and not good at all when you stick a subject right in front of just a flat screen. If the camera's moving, but the environment is staying static behind you, well, that's not like real life, right? That's just gonna look fake. Oh, you're shooting in front of a screen. Mandalorian combined all of it to make it look so cool because they had physical props. They built these entire physical environments in front of these huge volumes. And so they combined both practical things and the virtual production wall behind them to get a really cool end result. So a lot of the work that visual effects artists would do in post-production with, you know, a green screen has actually moved to pre-production, making all of these digital assets. You can design an entire world in Unreal Engine from the ground up, or buy 3D assets from different 3D model stores, right? And then stick a subject in front of it and then explore that world with the camera and your real life subject. It's pretty crazy when it's done right. At Sony's booth at NAB, I actually got to chat with a DP and focus puller who have been on these sets.
What I think is really interesting is, for example, with the plates we shot here, we shot them in Montana, in the snow, in somewhere that might be hard for the production to get to, especially if it's just for a couple days. And to bring that into this environment where we have control, there's a lot of freedom there.
So there are a ton of positives with virtual production. You have infinite golden hour, right? So instead of only having 30 minutes to shoot that perfect scene, right? You now have full control to shoot that scene however many times that you need to in order to get it perfect, because you control 100% of the lighting and the environment, everything. You're able to really quickly transition in between different sets and different scenes. Reflections on costumes and objects reflect the actual environment, so that saves a ton of time in post-production. I don't even want to know how long it takes the Marvel people to clean up all of the green spill from the green and blue screens. Another point was how much money you save from not having to scout all these locations and traveling to the locations. However, I feel like that's just substituted for the pre-production time visual artists have to spend actually making these environments though. So I don't think you're saving time there. You're showing up on set knowing exactly what the weather is, what the colors are gonna be. The only variables you have to worry about is actors acting. And speaking of actors, and well, everyone on set, they are just so much more immersed into the actual story because they feel like they're in it.
Yeah, there's definitely times where you're in the moment and in the shot, like either pulling focus or operating, and you kind of peek your head out and you forget where you are for a moment. I mean, it's pretty funny. You're really in the shot, and then all of a sudden you look around and be like, oh yeah, this isn't real.
So the line is really blurring in between mediums, right? Unreal Engine is usually used to build video games. The crossover into film is actually pretty cool. I mean, think about it. You could potentially port over the same environments that you made for the movie straight into the video game that then users can then explore for themselves, right? There's many possibilities just beyond just shooting a TV show or movie. But there are problems. It's not perfect. Does it actually save time when it seems like a lot of these productions are still having to spend a ton of time in post-production fixing things because, well, taking a camera and shooting it at a LED wall has some issues. Take your phone camera and just shoot it at your TV. You're gonna get some moire. You're gonna get some weirdness, right? And that comes up. And what's so interesting, as I researched this more, I found all of these breadcrumbs across the internet about Mandalorian not even using the backgrounds that they shot with this wall. Apparently, they still did a ton of rotoscoping in post-production. If you don't know what rotoscoping is, it's basically just masking your subjects out from the background and inserting another background, which is not something you would think you would have to do with virtual production because that's kind of the point, right? So you still get some of the benefits, right? The actors were right in the action, the reflections that were happening off of the very reflective armor of the Mandalorian were still accurate to the actual environment. You just couldn't have a costume like that if you were shooting green screen. But it's just kind of interesting that Mandalorian led the charge with this virtual production thing and still had to spend all the time in post-production fixing a lot of it when that really is the biggest selling point. I don't know, man. Is it all a cover-up? Is it big virtual production? And it really just started from someone's comment at NAB saying, oh yeah, you know, Mandalorian, they had a rotoscope out almost all of the backgrounds and put in high-res versions of the backgrounds and blah, blah, blah. And that led me to Googling, and then, you know, I would see a tweet here or a YouTube comment there, but I could not find any official news articles or interviews talking about it. Just redacted Reddit comments and little threads here and there. It's interesting, it's very interesting. So my hypothesis is, yeah, the first season of Mandalorian, they tried out new tech and it didn't work out the way they thought it was going to. But all of their newer Star Wars productions are still using the same technology. So my guess is ILM, who did all of the virtual production from Mandalorian, was like, whoops, okay, fix it in post, right? We know how to do that. And they see this technology as something worth investing in and learning along the way. And I guess it might just be very, very messy up front because it takes a lot of money. That Mandalorian screen was like a $30 million wall.
How do visual effects artists feel?
Well, they have a huge part of it. Like, we can't do this without them a lot of the time. They have to help build these worlds. They have to clean up the edges. I think it's a hand-in-glove thing with visual effects. I don't think they're antagonistic at all.
And so VFX artists, don't worry, you still have a job. The tools might be changing, but all I've learned in my research for this video is, wow, it still takes a village. Disney has another Star Wars project coming up that is using this tech, and you know, it looks super cool. I mean, sometimes I feel like everything is just getting a little too crisp, and so, you know, sometimes that makes it look a little fake, but nonetheless, you know, looks better than this. So going back to the issues, what specifically are those issues that led to all of that rotoscoping? Number one, moire. So this happens when you have clashing patterns in between a screen and a camera. Moire is the main issue why Mandalorian had to redo a lot of the backgrounds. This is why a lot of virtual productions have to have a very large space to shoot, because you don't want the camera to get too close to the screen. So the distance in between the screen and camera can affect moire, but also something called the pixel pitch distance. The smaller the pixel pitch means that the pixels are closer together. The closer the pixels, the better the image is and the less moire that you're gonna get. So the closer to the wall you can actually shoot, which then means, well, maybe you don't need as big of a wall because you don't have to shoot so far out. This is actually a part of the big bet that Sony is making.
So my name is Masaki. I'm in charge of Sony's virtual production studio. It's called Sony Innovation Studios. As a stage-wise, I'd say we're not the biggest stage in the world, but resolution-wise, most likely one of the highest resolution we have. Essentially, we want to change the perception that some people think that virtual production, you cannot shoot the background, and that may be a combination of the asset quality and or the display quality. We want to change the perception. Even if virtual production, you can focus on the background because you have high resolution panel, and that's something we have been trying our best to solve.
They're making walls with much smaller pixel pitches than the industry standard. The industry standard is above 2 millimeters, and well, their new walls have a pixel pitch of only 1.5 millimeters. Another issue is color, and something that you have to correct and fix in post. A lot of the times the color of the LED wall is not going to match perfectly with the color that the camera is shooting. And then another issue, if you're shooting with real backgrounds, is actually having cameras that shoot high enough resolution for the plates. So think about it. If you have these huge LED walls, well, you then have to have cameras that shoot super high resolution to fill up those walls. Of course, that's not something that you have to worry about if you're building a virtual environment in Unreal Engine, but if you're going for a real environment, you need a lot of resolution to make it look real. And then last but not least, cost, which I don't see this problem being solved anytime soon, but those virtual production studios are charging day rates of anywhere from like $40,000 to $100,000 a day. Because not only do you need the wall, but you need the talent that can utilize it. In the past 3 years, a ton of companies have popped up. So maybe competition will bring the cost down, maybe? I think the companies entering the arena are kind of playing with an all or nothing mentality. They're like, no, we need to develop our own proprietary technology that makes us the best. So we are one of only 3 or 4 production studios that then gets acquired by a Disney or a Sony, etc. And I imagine these will be kind of like their own technologies within specific studios, and this really isn't going to democratize filmmaking, at least for the next 10 years, because in order to make this look good, you need the money. The money and the talent and the expertise. Bringing it back to Sony, I think this is why Sony is really paying attention to this space. One, they have the money to invest. Two, they see these issues. And then three, they're actually positioned in a very unique place to solve these issues. Sony both makes LED walls and cinema cameras. And well, would you have it? They make huge budget movies and music productions that can then benefit from this technology. So, you know, move over Disney, there's another big man on campus. And this is a reason why Sony Cine was so focused on this at NAB, not just because they have their new LED walls with the minimal pixel pitch, but they also released something new called their virtual production toolset. So this includes a virtual Venice camera, a display plugin, and a color calibration tool that works directly within Unreal Engine. So the display plugin allows virtual art departments to have access to the Venice's color pipeline. Remember Venice, that's like the fancy cinema camera, right? So they have access to the Venice color pipeline during pre-production to create all of those assets that you need before you show up to shoot. This plugin also creates an alert system, both in pre-production and while you're shooting when it detects moire, because oftentimes you're not gonna see that in real life. And then with their color calibration tool, the colors on the wall and the colors in camera will also match up perfectly, so you don't have to fix that in post. So all of those tools seem like a great step to get virtual production one step closer to what everyone thought it was when all of those Mandalorian behind the scenes videos were coming out, you know, truly capturing everything in camera. I don't think it's gonna trickle down to us normals for a while, but I did see a little bit of that at NAB. It was actually pretty cool. Before I send you off with that clip, Squarespace, thank you so much for sponsoring this video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform if you are an artist who wants to show off their portfolio to the world to get more clients. If you run an e-commerce store, if you have a physical location where you need to book appointments, they have all of the tools that you could possibly need. Squarespace is always adding so many features, and guys, the end of last year was a huge update. They introduced the Fluid Engine and it changes everything. You can use one of their beautiful templates to get started on your website, or you can go with the Fluid Engine, which is essentially a drag and drop website builder where you can put photos, different blocks, email newsletter blurbs, anything wherever you want on the website. So building a website on Squarespace is now 100% customizable, and you can adjust things on how it'll look based on if someone's viewing your website on a desktop, a phone, a tablet. The sky is the limit now. And Squarespace has always had amazing third-party extensions that help take your website to the next level. If you're selling physical goods, digital goods, anything under the sun. I just opened up a Printful store that integrates into my Squarespace website for merch. It's just, there's so many things. And now I'm finding so many more fun things. Like there's this plugin that changes the cursor to a peach emoji. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm very excited for the sarad.com 2.0, all on Squarespace. So whether you need to do scheduling for a space rental, or maybe you're a creative and you want to show off your portfolio to clients, or you want to start kind of a Patreon-like community, but on your website, sell physical goods, sell digital products, you can do it all with Squarespace. It is time to build your beautiful Squarespace website. If you want to check it out, go to squarespace.com for a free trial, or go to squarespace.com/SaraDietschy, that's me, for 10% off of your first purchase of a domain or website. Okay, so if you're sitting at home and you're like, well, how does this affect me? I watch the content, I consume the content, it doesn't matter if it's green screen or virtual production. Who cares? Well, this concept of shooting something in front of a screen isn't just for the big guys. I've actually shot B-roll of technology in front of my Samsung QLED 8K TV, and you know, it turned out pretty good. Now, that TV being 65 inches doesn't make it the best for that. You know, usually you want a little bit more space, but this is really not a foreign concept. And I love seeing what Potato Jet did with his new studio. He essentially just got, I think, like 3 TVs, put some curtains over it, you know, using physical props in front of a screen, and then he can change his background in his videos to whatever he wants, and it literally looks like it's a real background and you're just looking through a window. It is so cool. There were a lot of really cool virtual production demos at NAB, but this one was definitely one of the coolest, and I feel like something that you guys could probably use like right now.
We have the Axoon CMO Pro here, which has an SDI and HDMI input. So we're taking the video signal from the camera out into this device. This converts it into a stream that then goes to an iPhone or an iPad or an iOS device. And what we're feeding here is an iPad Pro running a beta ChromaLink app And then we have these tracking points here that are tracking the colors in the shot. This one's tracking up here, this one's down here, and they're controlling two pro-light lights up here, so the color of the lighting is following the color of what we're shooting, and it's kind of a poor man's virtual production. It's just a TV, that's all it is. But a lot of people are doing this now because you can do car shots, you can do all sorts of really clever shots just with a large TV. And when you have the ability then to track the color of the lights, so if it was a car shot, process shot, as the car goes under the trees and things like that, the light would change. And that's one of the things that really makes virtual production much more convincing, is when the foreground lighting matches the background lighting.
Whew, okay, these videos always turn out to be longer than I think. Did you enjoy it? I know it was kind of out of left field, but I found it interesting. So even if only 12 people are watching this video, hello, hi, how are you? Again, Sara Peachy, like that like button, hit the subscribe button down below for new videos every single week. And until next time, everyone, stay peachy. Okay, bye.